What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and the Storm comic gives us our new cosmic hierarchy in Marvel Comics. And we can do a more in-depth explanation if you guys are interested in this. But keep in mind, the war above all is on its way, a cosmic entity war, essentially. And we'll talk more about this as we get through it. So, what this does here is this opens up with the Scarlet Witch, where she says, "Magic is chaos. I have seen ancient masters of the mystic arts brought to their knees by a suckling sorcerer's apprentice with a misshapen toothpick for a wand. In the world of magic, victory does not always go to the strong." And this is an important thing, because what this does is it's showing us what's happening on the planet of man. Now, this is the first real appearance of this planet. This is not a long-standing thing, but these are the actions of Mistress Death, right? Keep in mind that what Mistress Death intends to do is to unleash an army of the dead across the universe and seemingly across the multiverse, all of creation. And that's what's happening here, right? The dead being used to raise all kinds of hell. And so the Scarlet Witch continues on, right? Neither does triumph go to the boastful. Vast knowledge does not assure it. Mages with priceless, powerful artifacts have met their swift ends at the hands of mere hoodlums. What we do is a high-stakes gamble where the dealers are psychopathic deities. In the world of mysticism, victory belongs to the biggest scoundrel. And what you're seeing here is the Serpent Valley within the Crimson Cosmos. This is the realm of Sidorak, and Akujin is leading an army through this place. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that Akujin, I think is how you pronounce her name, is basically the servant, right, of a more powerful deity who had been defeated by Storm and locked away in a pocket dimension. It's what Storm's been doing. So this part of the story is really nothing more than just Storm's actions coming home to roost. But one of the crazy things about the Crimson Cosmos, if you're familiar with this, and you're familiar with what Donny Cates was doing during his run on Doctor Strange, you're going to start to notice something very, very familiar. The War of the Seven Spheres is going to start taking form over the course of this comic. And again, we'll talk more about that here in a little bit. But Scarlet Witch continues on. Everything about what we do requires deceit, to appear weak when we are strong, strong when we are weak, to appear close when we are far, and far when we are close. It's all a dance of lies, and the better we are at it, the deadlier we are. Sometimes we become so proficient at it that even the spellcaster no longer knows what is true. You've dipped your toes in magic now and again, Storm. I would love nothing more than to share this part of my life with you. But at this moment, you are not yet a part of it in the way that you think you are. You have not been baptized in its bitter waters. You have not submerged yourself in its secret rituals and communal dangers. This is my world. Now, this is a very important statement. This is not Wanda telling Storm that she's less than or she cannot become that powerful. It's basically telling Storm, you have just started your first steps. Because lest we forget, while Storm is a very powerful mutant within Marvel Comics, an Omega level mutant with the power over weather manipulation, she does know magic. It's one of the most underused parts of her character. And it's amazing to see that Miriwa is actually using it within this comic and building on it, right? It's just something that's always needed attention and never quite got it. But keep in mind, despite the fact that Storm does know how to use magic, there is all the difference in the world between someone who can practice some measure of mysticism and someone like Wanda or Doctor Strange or Jericho Drumm, people who have literally bathed themselves in the waters of magic and mysticism. They are as much a part of that landscape as it is a part of them. And Wanda is accurate when she says that there are instances when you can lose yourself in this world. You can literally get trapped. You can start to get to this place where you don't know what's real and what's false, and you lose track of your own spell casting. It's a very dangerous place to be. And that's where you have Storm, who's literally trying to bring herself down, right? Control her environment. Because what Wanda is doing is literally closing in on her. And Storm is claustrophobic. And so that's why she keeps telling herself, right? Focus. None of this is real. She starts counting down from 99, right? She says things like alternate atmospheric pressure sporadically, raise atmospheric temperature exponentially, inflicting barotrauma and hypothermia on the spellcaster. She's doing what she can to overcome Wanda, but she is so ill-equipped to face off against someone like Wanda, she's basically hopeless here. And that's where you end up finding out none of this is really happening. It's all taking place in the Mindscape. And so it's essentially Wanda training Storm, or at least Wanda giving Storm a taste of what Wanda is capable of. Because if this is only happening in the Mindscape, what happens when it happens in the real world? And that is what she's trying to prepare her for. Because she says, you are powerful, Aurora, but for the trials ahead, that power does not matter. And where Storm initially says it doesn't matter much, Wanda says no, it doesn't matter at all, right? Doctor Strange, when he was Sorcerer Supreme, was once sent to the emergency room barely alive because he was harmed by the most mundane of instruments, an ordinary handgun. And that's actually true. So that's in a story called Doctor Strange the Oath. Hell's bells. It's one of the funniest openings to a Doctor Strange story ever. But then she goes on and she says, yet he is the same man who single-handedly defeated Sun God of the Great Society, a being who floored the Incredible Hulk. Now, that's also true. And those of you guys who are familiar with Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers run, my God, yes, it's from that, right? In fact, Sun God and the Great Society were one of the only worlds that were found by the Illuminati to successfully fend off incursions. It was nuts. They were basically an allegory for DC's Justice League. I mean, we figured that out very fast. But again, that's where Wanda says, how does one face such levels of unpredictability? You, on the other hand, have a parasitic relationship with truth and order. And in fact, I would go so far as to say that this is Muriwa teasing the idea that Storm could become vastly more powerful than she is right now. Not even through mysticism, just because of the nature of her powers. And here's what I mean. When Wanda makes this statement, right, you on the other hand have a parasitic relationship with truth and order, Storm says, you've seen me summon raging winds and create turbulent tides, and yet you describe me with the word order. And Wanda says, mere imitations of chaos. You vibrate molecules to exude heat, condense the steam in the air to create rain, swirl winds around yourself to fly. Even your raging winds are just the result of your rapid alteration of temperature and the planet's electromagnetic spectrum. Everything you do has a logical cause and effect. Now, here's why this matters, right? Because while Storm's powers have certainly been explained multiple times over the years, post Jonathan Hickman's Krakoa age, we haven't really seen much in terms of Marvel coming out and establishing the specifics of how Storm's powers work. And the reason why I say that's important is because whenever you're talking about relaunches, like Jonathan Hickman's House and Powers of X, this usually also comes with occasional reworkings of the nature of a character's powers, or how those powers can be modified or adjusted, how they use them, different things like that, which can completely alter what levels of power that character can achieve at some point in the future. But what you're getting here, right? You vibrate molecules to exude heat. That's molecular manipulation. Now, we always kind of knew that, but seeing it written on paper, seeing it actually in a comic post-Hickman's X-Men era, this changes everything. Because now what it does is it gives any future writer an in, the ability to establish that what Storm is essentially doing by manipulating the weather is manipulating molecules. And being able to manipulate molecules in order to exude heat is one step away from being able to manipulate molecules to restructure matter. So there's a credible argument to be made here, as crazy as it may sound, that Storm is one solid story arc away from being able to manipulate matter on the molecular level. Will it make her someone like Franklin Richards? No, but it would certainly make her someone like Jim Jaspers, right? It's really kind of nuts when you start looking at this. And so in response to everything that Wanda just said, Storm replies, she says, while you, as the Sorcerer Supreme, could drink a glass of grape juice and spew out a herring. And Wanda just tells her, right, Akujin told you she will be back in 5 days. Kindly take her up on her offer. Give her what she demands. Return her imprisoned master to her, and let us be free of this threat of mystical invasion. And she says, trust me when I say, you do not want this war. her spells would not be as easy to break as the ones we just trained with. If you try to play in my world at this moment in your mystical journey, you will die. But that's where Storm's almost arrogance, hubris comes into play, right? This is not my first war, Wanda. And Wanda just tells her, as the new Sorcerer Supreme, I have obsessively looked into the lives of previous holders of the title. Aurora, these wars are not quite like anything you have faced before. Time becomes a mere tool for these sorcerers to abuse. Death and immortality are their weapons of mass destruction. You are one of the most virtuous people I know, but the battlefields of these wars are the altars where virtues go to be sacrificed. These wars are not fought with honor, integrity, or empathy. Now, this is important because this is why I say the War of the Seven Spheres. The War of the Seven Spheres was quite literally a civil war among magical deities, right? Just some of the most powerful magical wielders in the entirety of the Marvel Universe, and on some level, the multiverse, all engaged in a massive war. The reality of what Wanda is telling Storm here is that over the course of Storm's life, her war has been against people who want to destroy the mutant population. Her war has been against incredibly powerful beings, right? Her war has on some level been against cosmic entities. But the reality here is that when it comes to magic and mysticism, it's a whole different world. The rules of the world vanish in the blink of an eye. Anything and everything becomes possible, and nothing is ever what it seems. Illusion is the name of the game. So I would go so far as to say that because of the level of power that people within this space have, Storm is not going to war against other people who can wield power. Storm's going to war against an army of people who can manipulate matter. And what do you do in a scenario like that? When everyone around you has the potential to rewrite reality, how do you possibly face off against a force like that? That's what we're talking about here, right? Going to war against tanks with nothing other than a handgun. There's nothing she can really do. And that's the significance of this, because Wanda tells her, you are friends with me, Doctor Strange, Jericho Drum, Ileana Rasputin, and many other sorcerers. Victor Von Doom's armored demeanor melts away around you. I believe your relationship with witches and warlocks has made you gravely underestimate the challenge ahead of you. Aurora, unlike your ever straightforward self, all your favorite sorcerers are tricksters. But it's her basically saying, you have kept company with sorcerers and sorceresses, and that has tricked you into believing that you have the same level of power they do. And that's a very important statement, because at that point, the conversation continues on to a degree. And Storm says, Wanda, this is your first time in the role of Sorcerer Supreme, as it is my first time operating solo, which is not technically true in Marvel Comics, but Muriel, I get where you're going with it, so we'll let it slide. Right? But she says, I have also had to shoulder a different yet similar burden when I took over leadership of the X-Men from Cyclops, which did happen in the Who Will Lead Them storyline. But she also says, I have felt the restraints that you must feel in this moment, the desire to play it safe so everything does not go to hell while you have the reins in your hands. The universe made me an offer I could not refuse. It offered me aid to protect my world, our world. I entrusted its potential for goodness, despite its abusive, cruel nature, and it betrayed me. That's the statement she's making when she's talking about the idea of being possessed with the power of eternity, which happened in the Thunder War storyline. But she also says, I trusted the humanity in the Bureau, but they sent Maggot to the morgue and Manifold to physical therapy in their attempt to assassinate me, which is also true. The FBI tried to secretly assassinate Storm. It didn't go well for them. And so that's where she continues on, and she says, if Akujin is trustworthy, if her intentions were, as she proclaimed, she would not have leveled the city of Biarritz to bargain for the release of her master, which is true. Initially, the way that event unfolded, I thought it was an illusion spell in order to hide the fact that Storm had actually leveled the city, that Storm was the one who destroyed it, thinking she was destroying Akujin's forces. Apparently it was the other way around, right? The idea was that Akujin had literally destroyed the city already and just tricked Storm into thinking she hadn't, right? But the point is, right, Storm says, I appreciate your courtesy and the warning, my friend, but I have a war to prepare for. But But that's where Storm starts to get this inner monologue, right? Do not push Wanda away. She seeks only to help. She worries about you, and you need her aid at this dire hour. You cannot do this alone. Maggot and Manifold helped when I called for it. I do not wish for Wanda to end up like they did. But the other side is, I need to do this alone. You will most probably die if you do this alone, Aurora Monroe, but everyone will be safe. That is all that matters. She's torn, right? And so we pick up 4 days before the invasion of Earth, because there was only a 5-day window here, right? Literally, Storm was told, bring my master back in 5 days, or I will bring to ruin everything you know and hold dear in this world. And so Storm makes an announcement to the world, and she says, when I say I believe in America, I do not just mean the patch of land bordered by Alaska and Maine. I believe in the people who call this land home. I believe in the people who, through kindness and sacrifice, make this land perpetually feel like home to their fellows. I believe in you as people. The city of Biarritz, on the other hand, no longer feels like home to its people. Their families have been taken from them. Their homes have been demolished. Their peace terrorized. Everything that made their beautiful city a home has been violently stripped away. That is why I will need you to believe in me too, as I leave your skies in this desperate hour to attend to the people of that city and provide them sanctuary in my home while they rebuild. To protect you in my absence, I have dispatched my storm engines, which still look amazing. And she says, do not fear them. Though born of extraterrestrial origins, they are loyal guardians and proven allies to whom I would entrust my entire life. They will be stationed in strategic locations across the country in your service and your service alone. The journey to a better tomorrow may be arduous, but will never stray from its righteous path. Though miles away, my heart remains with you. I love you all. I will miss the warmth your skies have provided me. So to a degree, it's a goodbye, because what Storm doesn't know is if she's going to survive this. And so this could very well be the final statement she makes to the world. And there's a beauty in this, right? There is a beauty in the fact that when she says things like, I love the people within this country, it's very Charles Xavier-esque, because she's also talking about the people who have historically hunted mutants down. So even in the face of what may very well be her imminent demise, she is still making the statement she loves everyone, including those that hate her so much. Now, the other thing to notice here is the FBI is in possession of Galacta. Now, you guys didn't really believe I was going to skip over that, did you? You didn't really believe I was going to skip past that, did you, right? Galacta is the daughter of Galactus. And if you are interested in a video about the character of Galacta, I have an Omega level video on her, and I'll post a link to it down in the description. Again, the Omega level series was a series where we covered the most powerful beings in Marvel Comics, and even DC Comics. But the point is, as far as this hierarchy part goes, this is where things start to get cool. Because at that point, we switch over to Akujin, right? And what we end up getting is this conversation between her and her sisters. Now, Iwin is the one in green, and Bogey is the one in maroon. And what ends up happening is that Akujin kind of continues on with a conversation she was already having, where she starts talking about the nature of the multiverse, right? Now, this is cool, because while the map is kind of off to the side, it is incredibly important, right? First, we have the House of Ideas. That's where the one above all resides, which makes perfect sense. The one above all basically represents Marvel's writers, editors, artists, right? The top brass, Dan Buckley making terrible decisions for how Marvel Comics should handle things. And then there's the upper realms, right? The upper realms are basically where you get like the Phoenix Force, different things like that, right? So this is the land of couldn't be, shouldn't be. So the Never Queen, right? These are the Beyonders, the dimension of manifestations where the living tribunal resides. Now, you'll also notice that a lot of this is actually a part, or at least is building on what Al Ewing did in Defenders Beyond. And that's why Defenders Beyond and even his Defenders and Ultimates runs are are so incredibly important, and it's why we cover them, right? Of course, after that, you basically have the realm of eternity, which is essentially our main universe, but within that, you have the realm of Mistress Death, which is a part, but is also separate. And then following that, you just kind of have smaller realms, right? Dimensions, essentially, within the larger main Marvel universe, right? The underworld, or at least the Greek underworld of Hades and Persephone. You've got the dimension of blood, which is literally housed by what are effectively goats that are almost vampiric in nature. It sounds kind of weird. You don't really see it all that often in Marvel Comics. There's the Crimson Cosmos, where you have Sidorak. Now, the reason why you see the scions of Sidorak is because they're Sidorak's children. That was a part of the whole storyline where Spider-Man fought the children of Sidorak, and that if he died permanently, it would have allowed Sidorak to invade the main Marvel universe, right? You've got Limbo with the Goblin Queen, Madeline Pryor, right? The Council of Godheads, or Sky Gods, as they're sometimes called. So this is traditionally Odin, Zeus, Vishnu, different people like that. Of course, Odin's not really a part of the landscape anymore. He's been dead for quite some time. But the point is, with this entire conversation that they're having, the question asked by Bogey is, what if the Master was incarcerated outside of the universe? And Akujin just says, after Hadad escaped his imprisonment and wreaked havoc across existence during the Thunder War, I strongly doubt any of the primordial abstract entities would allow his extradition to one of their upper realms. It is more likely that the Master is being held prisoner in one of the countless pocket dimensions within this universe. Because keep in mind, even if he was housed in one of the upper realms, it probably wouldn't work all that well. Because one of the things that we saw was that Hadad had used like the Phoenix Force, right? He had defeated the Living Tribunal seemingly at one point in time, at least if I remember correctly. But the level of power he possessed was so extreme, he operated on a multiversal level. And so that's why Akujin says, he's in the main sphere on Earth. I sensed him when I was there. And so Iwan just says, well, then we have 2 realms left to traverse before we search the main sphere. We've paid Sidorak's children the toll that they requested. And then there's a little banter here about how they just charge a lot more on the toll than Sidorak did, right? Because the kids are greedy, right? But they are in control of his realm, and so the toll must be paid. But she continues on. She says, what we should be more concerned with is how their army is not what it used to be. We would not swell our numbers with recruits from the Scion's forces. We will not have the numbers to take complete control of Limbo like we planned. So I suggest we take a detour to Dimension Blood instead. It's home to various warrior races and willing fighters. We will take the path through the underworld to the main sphere instead of the previously planned dimension, right? Here's the problem with this. Hades and Persephone are dicks as far as Akujin is concerned, right? She says they will not give us passage through the underworld. We can remove Hades and Persephone, usurp their control over their army, and then we'll have even more soldiers to attack the main sphere with. But that's where Iwan's just like, that's a terrible plan. If Olympus discovers that we killed Hades and Persephone, we will find ourselves at war with the Olympian gods, which will be a very long one. They will not stop fighting until they kill us or we kill them. And that's it. Right now, Bogey kind of chimes in here and says a considerable amount of time that could be spent searching for the Master. And that's where Iwan says it will also deplete our forces significantly. So clearly Akujin here is the one who's kind of very hot-headed, right? First to conflict and nothing else. But the conversation continues on, right? Iwan says, I could teleport our army from Dimension Blood directly to Earth. And Akujin says it's simply just too far, right? You can't do that on your own. And she says, then I could teleport them platoon by platoon. But at that point, you're talking about trickling forces in, right? And a manageable amount of forces. So all that would really happen here is that once the heroes on Earth begin to realize their world is being invaded by some extra-dimensional force, but the extra-dimensional force is coming in pieces at a time, the superheroes are going to defeat the first group. And then when the second group shows up, they'll defeat the second group and the third group. This is one of those times when the only way to really win is to invade Earth with an overwhelming force so extreme that it turns into a war of attrition, right? The heroes just can't fight anymore. And so that's why Akujin says, we will be feeding our army to the Earthers in small batches. They will easily overwhelm us. And so that's where Bogey says, well, then I will speak with Hera of Olympus. And then the question's asked, right? Have you seen how the Olympians treat our kind? And Iwan's like, how they treat women? And she says, no, immortals who are not gods, which is true, right? Whenever it comes to gods who are, by all standards of measurement, immortal, even if only in spiritual form, they look down on immortals who are not gods. There is an arrogance there among them. And that's why Bogey says, Iwin, talk some sense into our sister. And Iwin just says, what offer will you make the queen of the Olympian gods, Bogey? And she just says, we have not reached a conclusion on which of Earth's metropolises we should lay waste to next. New York City of America, its hub of superhumans and heroes, or Bernanzana of Wakanda, its greatest stronghold. But only one of these cities contains what even the queen of the Olympian gods covets. And that's where Iwin chimes in and is like, so you want to promise her all of the vibranium in Wakanda? And Bogey says, no. The paths to Hera's heart are many. Wakanda guards many secrets besides its precious metal. Now, we are finding that out to be true in the Dungeons of Doom storyline. Lest you guys forget what's going on, Dungeons of Doom has an agent who is of Wakanda but not of Wakanda, and is basically looking to attain a treasure that seemingly belonged to Wakanda at one point in time. So vibranium is not its only resource, and we're actually seeing that huge expansion to Wakanda within Marvel Comics in the here and now. And so that's where Kujin just says, you cannot keep pretending that this is not a terrible idea, Iwin. She's going to get herself killed for nothing. And Bogey just says, sisters, nothing is going to stop us from setting our master free, not even a realm full of gods. And so that's when you switch over to France, right? The fact that Storm has brought the sanctuary here where people can call home. Now, they live within the sanctuary, right? They're actually inside of this facility that Storm has, but it's not without its problems. And you do have people who are going back and forth. For example, one of the things that goes on here is you have a mutant who is angry about the fact that humans are here. Because of the fact that the sanctuary was created by Storm, the argument here is that it should only be housed by mutants. And in fact, this human kid says, just because I'm human does not mean my apartment did not get destroyed by monsters. The demons did not ask what race I was before they wrecked my home and killed my mother. But then the question's asked, but who was getting rescued? We as mutants had to save our own people while your buddies in what are basically your humanitarian forces prioritized saving humans over mutants. But the reality here is that even if that is the case, which it most likely was, this is not a battleground for mutants versus humans. This is a place of refuge. It's a place of safety. Quite literally, they've shown up in Storm's place of worship and started a fight. And how much of a dick do you have to be to instigate something like that? So of course, Storm puts it into it very fast, right? She ends it incredibly quickly and then just feeds all three of them together. And it's like, in the face of food, what does any of this matter? Which is true. Food is the great unifier. Watch how many people who have all the differences and problems with each other in the world, watch those problems come to an end when they sit down and just eat some amazing food together, right? I imagine most world's problems could be solved by just feeding everybody some really good food, hopefully. Maybe that's just me being an optimist. But the fact is, right, what you do get here is a really interesting moral quandary, right? And here's exactly how it unfolds. This statement's made. Mosquitoes kill about 1 million people a year. Nobody pretends that they are anything but disease-carrying, pain-inflicting bloodsuckers. We do everything in our power to remove them from our homes and prevent them from entering our communities. If not, we risk our lives and the lives of our children. Are there good mosquitoes out there? Ones who are saying, tomato juice isn't half bad. Maybe we should just try that instead. Maybe, but because of climate change, we are beginning to get those malaria-carrying critters more and more. So tell me, are we going to leave our homes and spaces open to these mosquitoes to come in and infect because there may be good ones among them? Krakoa was a haven for us while it lasted. We did not have to wake up wondering how we are going to be harassed that day or concern ourselves with what new propaganda the news was going to be selling about us next. We could just exist and be whoever or whatever we wanted to be. We were free and we were happy. You were on Krakoa's governing council, Storm. I don't know why you would not want that for us in your sanctuary too. Humans kill more of us than sentinels do? How are we supposed to sleep with our eyes closed like we used to when you've invited them in? Now, here's what's really interesting about this, right? What you're talking about here is youth versus wisdom. By and large, this guy is making credible points, but part of the points that he's making is him just convincing himself that he's right, likely by surrounding himself with people who share the same opinions he does. But Storm fires back and she says, as a people, we have always endeavored to assimilate into human society, dining on their cuisine, sharing their language, living where they live. Everything. We served and protected their people, yet it did not diminish their animosity towards us. They could not see past our mutant gene. We attempted to separate ourselves. Genosha, Limbo, Utopia, Krakoa. We had our own culture that felt like a long-lost home, spoke our own euphonious language. We were a people united, yet it did not diminish their fear and hatred of us. They still could not see past our mutant gene. In both circumstances, to many, it seemed as though evil won. But I believe that the day we turn our backs on those in need, no matter their race or creed, is the day that evil truly rises victorious. And that's where we get this monologue where it says, unlike Storm, the grimy parts of our world have no strong moral disposition against murder, as the grounds of the Storm Sanctuary soak up the blood of an innocent mutant, an act that is sure to cause chaos in Storm's abode. But we look beyond the present as Mistress Death's machinations reach our planet. To eradicate our homeworld, she could have sent Thalagar, the behemoth's wraith, a patron god of the galactic frontier who wrestled black holes for pleasure when life yet filled his lungs. She could have unleashed Null, the symbiote god's wraith, a being who once engulfed our entire planet in total darkness, nearly extinguishing its light forever. She could have sent the race of any of the dark beings from any of the dark realms who had ever died. However, Mistress Death chose a different strategy. She selected someone who knew our planet intimately, who knew our weaknesses and how to exploit them. She chose a being who had died multiple times, but their soul was always intercepted by eternity from descending into Death's domain. But this cunning being made the great mistake of once entering into a deal with Mistress Death, breaking his protection bond with eternity. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. It gives us one heck of a cliffhanger. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.